Hi everyone, and a warm welcome to tomorrow's Tech Today, bringing you the latest in technology, talent, transformational change, and of course tech as a force for good. I'm your host, Professor Sally Eaves, and today we're focusing in on the energy sector, one of the most dynamic industries today. And in this special feature with Microsoft, we're exploring just how companies can better drive digital transformation, decarbonize, and achieve growth for shared value too. In particular, we'll be unpacking the critical role of cloud storage and data analytics for grid modernization and the power pairing of AI and data to shape the future of energy, especially clean energy, alongside talent and ecosystem considerations as well. So let's get started. And to do so, I'm delighted to be joined now by the brilliant Bilal Khursheed, Director of Energy and Sustainability for Americas at Microsoft. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Bilal to the show. Wonderful to meet you here.
Well, wonderful to be here, Sally. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And honestly, what an important topic area I think we have on our hands today. I think energy, one of the most interesting dynamic sectors right now. So much is happening. Whether we look at it from a supply chain perspective, cybersecurity, sustainability, so many different things. What are you seeing here, Bilal, in your role? And also, just to set the scene as well, tell us a little bit more about kind of the person behind the tech and your role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is an industry that I'm very passionate about, and an industry that I've been involved in for quite so many years. My background, I've been within the industry for about 17 years now. And here at Microsoft, I mean, we're doing so much cool stuff within the energy industry, and leading the energy and sustainability business and the power utility business more specifically here at Microsoft. I get the opportunity to work very closely with industry leaders, thought leaders, with industry executives and utilities all across the globe, which has been fantastic. And just thinking about all of the challenges that this industry has, if you roll back the clock a bit, the power grid as we know it began its journey in the late 19th century. Back then it was all about large scale centralized generation. We had these massive power plants, mostly coal, gas fired, that were churning out electricity, sending it down long transmission lines to homes and businesses. And that made sense at the time. The technology we had was well suited for these industrial setups. It was like this one-way street where power plants at one end, users at the other end, and power flowed in one direction. And that was that. Now, you fast forward to today, and things have really started to change. We're seeing a fundamental shift in how we generate and distribute power. And there's several reasons for this, Sally. I mean, for one, the technology has evolved. And of course, climate change and sustainability is another big factor. So we're moving away from these massive centralized power stations, and we're seeing the rise of what we call decentralized generation. Things like rooftop solar panels, local wind farms, small hydroelectric plants, battery storing, all of this renewable energy. And the sources are spread out much more closer to where they're actually used. So the really cool advantages, of course, one, it's efficient, highly sustainable, but that comes with some significant challenges. The grid itself, the infrastructure itself, was not designed to have this kind of bi-directional power flow as well. So we'll dive into some of this, but I mean, there's so much that's going in behind that, and so much complexity that is being introduced because of the shift in what we're seeing. I'd like to say the very physics of the grid are changing.
It's such a good example. I love the fact that you've kind of shown where we've come from. And you're absolutely right. When we go back to the start of this, it was completely aligned and fit for purpose. Just now, we've got such a kind of scale, scope, sophistication of different types of changes, whether that's cybersecurity, when we've never seen utilities kind of threatened so much from that particular area, even to the extent of kind of moving beyond, say, malware to killware, I've been looking at recently as well. So that has taken on a whole new resonance, but also the cost crisis around energy too, fragility of supply chains, excluded populations, and as you mentioned there, the tech convergence that can really make a difference to kind of overcome some of these challenges, some of this complexity, some of the visibility issues as well, and actually use this as an opportunity. Because I think done right, if we address the challenges in energy the right way, we can actually build in energy security from the other sense. I think we can actually make a real difference and help so many people. So it's an exciting kind of juxtaposition here to overcome these challenges and really seize the opportunities to do this right too. And on that subject of convergence, another trend I've certainly been seeing in is kind of how the electricity sector is converging with communications far more too. As part of this, so we've got this bigger convergence with the grid that you were talking about there, and obviously as part of that, massive data sharing is happening, isn't it? So could you explain a little bit more about the implications of that? So from an analytics point of view, cloud storage, for example, too, it's inherent in this grid modernization imperative, really.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's the power utility sector. A lot of people don't know this, but it actually was one of the sectors that produces the most amount of data, given the amount of sensors, the amount of extensive networks that we have on the transmission side, the distribution side, the generation side. We are producing mountains and mountains and mountains of data. And with the introduction of more and more renewables into the grid, with the introduction of more IoT devices into the grid that bring a lot of benefit in terms of higher degrees of reliability, a higher degree of situational awareness into what's happening in the grid in real time, and then being able to use the cloud to really aggregate and automate a lot of the actions that need to be taken to ensure higher levels of reliability. But a lot of this, like you mentioned cybersecurity risk. Because of all of these new data points, all of these access points, the cybersecurity risk begins to grow as well. It used to be that the biggest concern for a power plant or for a utility was a physical breakdown. A busted pipe, a faulty valve could be huge implications in terms of a disaster. But now there's threats around cyber attacks. And the interconnected world, like you mentioned, between customers, utilities, and other organizations, all of us rely on all of this digital technology. It helps us manage the grid more effectively. But imagine a scenario where hackers gain control of a power plant, right? It could shut down operations, could manipulate equipment, could cause physical damage. Not just on the power plants, but the grid itself, right? Even right down to smart meters and to customers. So it's absolutely a real threat. The way we deal with this is through very strong, very effective, robust cybersecurity measures. And this is a range of secure software, encrypted communications. And this is one of the things that actually attracted me to Microsoft was the amount of focus that there is on cybersecurity, billions of dollars being invested to secure infrastructure and critical infrastructure. So, I mean, this is absolutely a risk that exists within the industry. It's all about risk mitigation, ensuring that we have effective controls and means to help mitigate that risk, and to be managing that data effectively.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the other thing that I've done a lot of work with Microsoft directly, and I've been really impressed with, say, the unification piece that supports this too. So, when we're talking about all kind of forms of digital transformation, really not just in energy sector, but particularly relevant because of the complexity we've been talking about here, and also the need to decarbonize as well. But the unification around all the different types of technologies that are coming together is absolutely huge as well. Because again, if you have complexity, the biggest way to deal with that is kind of obviously reducing that, but having the visibility to understand exactly what you have in that estate, because again, obviously that reduces risk. But what I've seen you doing with things like intelligent edge and cloud, but also AI, big data platforms, etc., bringing these things together, the facilitation piece for organizations, not just from the technology, but the advice and the knowledge sharing, whether that's around the risk reports around security or the new energy reports that's come out recently too. I think that's also incredibly important. It's bringing it together from a tech piece point of view, but also having that trusted partnership support too. Because I think, again, we're seeing we can't do these things alone. You have to come together to solve these different, complicated, messy challenges, frankly. So I'd love to kind of explore that a little bit more about how you support unification from a technology standpoint, but also kind of how you're working with others in the ecosystem too, to help make a difference here. Because again, I think power of the ecosystem is one of the biggest trends going, and it's such an important one. I'm so glad we've kind of reached that point now.
Yeah, Sally, I'm so glad that you brought that up and that you mentioned it explicitly, that we cannot do this alone.
Yep.
And that is absolutely primary to our position in energy here at Microsoft, is that we are all about partnership and co-innovation to solve some of the biggest challenges that our generation has ever faced in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of sustainability, in terms of all of the challenges that we have on the power grid itself. So that is absolutely a core part of my role, and what we're doing to really create a more of a holistic ecosystem of partners that work together to solve these challenges. the folks that have deep rooted credibility in this industry, that have been serving this industry for, in some cases, 100 years, the GEs, the Schneiders, the Siemens, those type of folks who bring deep rooted credibility, who build the operational technology aspect, the convergence of OT to digitalization in the cloud, and leveraging the cloud infrastructure to aggregate a lot of those type of control systems. And this requires some deep collaboration and deep partnership. And this is something that is absolutely core to how we go to market. I've got several examples that I can think of. Some of the incredible work that we're doing with Schneider Electric. Schneider Electric has the partnership that we have is deep rooted. They've deployed or have re-architected their platforms or their solutions to run natively in the Azure stack. So software and technology that would manage your distributed energy resources, for example. These are technologies that typically have ran on-prem, and now we're deploying them in the Azure cloud. And this brings a ton of benefit for the industry, being able to aggregate massive amounts of data in real time, compute that data in real time, and act against it. Is making a real impact in terms of ensuring that we have the highest degree of reliability with the assets and infrastructure that we have in place. It's truly fantastic, and partnership is absolutely key.
It's a great example. I've done some work with Schneider Electric as well, and I'll share actually in some of the notes around this podcast too. There's a blog that I've got on their website actually, which is talking about this from a measurement point of view too. And I love what you were saying there about the power of data to give the agency to act. It's not just active intelligence, kind of right data, right role, right time. It's also the confidence to apply that as well. And so the data trust, all those different elements coming together, but also the measurement of impact around this too. And that's what I was writing about with Schneider, about kind of going beyond some of the targets to more, for example, science-based ones that are elevated another level, but also helping people to measure in a way that's more consistent and comparable, so that you can look at what one organization is reporting on against another and actually be able to make conscious comparisons. Because at the moment that can be quite challenging, both internally for organizations, making sure, say you're looking at scope 1 to scope 3 and internal and external sources. And then presenting that way that people can make comparisons, and you get that buy-in along the way if you measure that right too. So I think this is a really interesting area as well, in terms of supporting the measurement of impact around changes, particularly around the SDGs, but sustainability being right up there, of course, for energy. But I think that's a really interesting area that I've also seen you really supporting too, and getting involved in this and helping organisations to do this better, because everyone benefits from that if we can get measurement right up there on the agenda too.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about sustainability, when we talk about kind of that collaboration that needs to exist across the industry, one of the key elements that comes to mind to me are smart grids and microgrids, and the role that that's going to play in terms of defining and really improving levels of sustainability across the entire industry. And just for your listeners, maybe going over, what we hear smart grids, microgrids often in the media, and I think that we don't do a good enough job in really explaining what is this technology that we keep hearing about in terms of smart grids and microgrids, and what does this relate to. And it touches on a lot of the aspects that you mentioned earlier, Sally, in terms of the new data that's being leveraged, the use of AI that's also being leveraged within the industry. But with smart grids and microgrids, the essence of this is really to ensure that we can allow to better balance and supply demand and respond to outages much faster, and even be able to integrate more renewable energy sources, right? So when we talk about sustainability, we know that renewable energy sources are going to be a central key component of that. And then plus you have smart meters. You can get real-time information on your energy usage, so you can make smarter, more greener choices. It's like ensuring that you have the technology in place to make real life changes to how you consume power as well. And then you can take this a step further, meet the microgrid. This is like a mini power grid that can operate independently from the main grid. So think about a small town, a university campus, for instance, that generates its own power, maybe through solar panels or its own wind turbines. And in normal times, it's connected to the main grid. But if there's an outage, it can disconnect and keep the lights on and using its local power. So it really cool stuff. To me, it's when the industry was starting to leverage this, in some cases was almost sci-fi-ish. It's pretty exciting. But really, these microgrids can boost resilience, especially in areas that are prone to natural disasters. And there's no shortage of that. Lately, you turn on the news at any given time, there's always some natural disaster that's on the news. So these microgrids are really there to help integrate more renewable energy into our power system and ensure that you can have the higher levels of reliability on the network as well.
I love that. And you know what that's made me think of as well, is I was talking about this only the other day, actually, about how surfaces are going to become a new frontier in energy management. So you've got the EV car itself, but what about what you can do with the surface of the road? Like we've seen in pavements and how that can generate solar, for example, too. But I think there's going to be even more connected kind of convergence across not just the car itself, but its interaction with the road surface and what we can do there, particularly in different countries, for example, to harness that power too. So I think we're going to go to an even more kind of integration around different surfaces for energy too, even our skin. Going forward as well, what energy can we capture from within, so with wearables and things and relate that. So I just think this whole area is getting more and more exciting, more and more dynamic about what we can do and how we can bring different technology and data sets together to make a difference in so many different ways. So I loved your example there, and it kind of got me on a new train of thought too, so I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So many different ways that you can leverage all of these technologies. And the one thing that that strings through all of these technologies is also AI, right? And Sally, before the session, we were talking about the AI and how it's become such a mainstream. I hate using the word buzz because I don't think it's buzz right now. I think it is going to be here, and it's here to stay. But even AI and the use of energy, a lot of people don't necessarily link AI to the power utility industry and how it fits within this industry. Thinking about data and all of that massive data that we produce and within this industry, we can't really do much with that data unless we really start making sense of it, and that's where AI comes in. These algorithms that can sift through just massive amounts of data and spot patterns that humans might miss. One thing that is really taking off in the industry is predictive asset maintenance, right? You can predict when a piece of equipment is about to fail, or even when demand is going to spike, and it's quite incredible. It's almost like having a super powered crystal ball of sorts to your disposal. And back to the predictive maintenance piece, by analyzing these patterns and anomalies on operational data, AI can predict when a machine or a particular asset is likely to fail, and it gives you that time to repair those assets to avoid some sort of a catastrophic breakdown. So really incredible stuff. Even if you look at energy demand forecasting, the AI can now analyze weather forecasts, can look at historical usage data, can go through real-time data from smart meters, take all of this in real time and begin to predict how much energy will be needed at any given time. And this really helps us balance and load the grid and prevent these blackouts. So when we think about AI, it's not just about robots or self-driving cars. It really is a powerful tool, and that's going to help us run the power grid more efficiently, more reliably, and of course, more sustainably as well.
I love that. It's an AI conversation beyond ChatGPT. I love that. I love that. I think it's so important because it's fantastic what we're seeing. Going back to ChatGPT for a second, the advances there, but obviously with advances, you need reflection on those too. So I love the fact this is such a tangible example of AI itself being used to be far more proactive with data. That's what I love with what you were talking about there. It's not trying to retrospectively look at an issue and try and understand it. It's getting ahead of that. Particularly all the changes, going back to the top of our conversation, the ability to have that active intelligence, but go beyond that to be truly proactive and plan ahead for all those different reasons around, improved decision making, better efficiency, boosting security, but also smart energy management that you were talking about there too. AI and obviously data together is a power pairing, isn't it? I think, to use that pun for the sector we're in, but it really is. Bring those two things together right. You're not just helping to kind of reshape the future of energy, for business benefit, but also for societal as well. So again, that's what I loved about the examples you're bringing to the fore there. You're seeing benefits for business in terms of cost savings, efficiency, productivity, satisfaction, but you're also seeing it for reduced impact on the environment as well. So incredible kind of example of shared value there with AI and data used in the right way. So love that. It's fantastic.
Agreed, Sally. I really think that we have just hit the tip of the iceberg, or scratch the surface, so to speak, when it comes to putting operational data to work within the industry, and quite honestly speaking, for all industries, more broadly speaking, just thinking about the use of AI and the impact it could have across all aspects of operations. But there are tremendous opportunities to take the data that already exists today and create meaningful actions that are going to have direct impact on reliability, have direct impact on customer and customer satisfaction when it comes to how they interact with their utilities, how the assets that are in use and the infrastructure that's in use within the entire industry. I mean, there's tremendous opportunity here. It's just imagine being able to converse with your data, right? And let's paint a scenario. Say, for example, there's a storm that's approaching your particular area, and your utility wants to better understand what are the impacts that this storm is going to have on the power network. So imagine going into your system and actually conversing with your data based on historical data, based on weather data, based on data, live sensor data that's coming from your assets, and being able to converse with it in terms of asking through the use of AI and through the use of other AI tools to better understand what is the impact on reliability in the area, what assets are most prone to failure based on the type of storm that's coming forward, how should I sequence my dispatch crews and my field maintenance crews and my restoration teams in what sequence to restore power. I mean, this is all real life example that are bringing tremendous amount of value for the industry and of course to society at large.
Absolutely, that ability to get ever more granular with those questions that you're asking, etc. Just like, again, the AI has been learning through that too, so everything is getting better and better, and that kind of consciousness about everything you're doing across business and societal benefits is really at the fore and accessible to everybody. So yeah, so important. I love the way that this is heading. I think it's a very, very exciting time. And on that note, I do a lot of work around kind of encouraging more people to get involved in tech, across all the different verticals that it can be involved in. And in particular, getting more diversity of people from backgrounds, so every angle of diversity, including neurodiversity. I'm particularly doing a lot of work on that at the moment. And everything we've talked about today, what a space to be to make a difference. The agency here to impact so many different areas across business and societal innovation. Kind of, wow, what a place to be. So I think I'd love to throw it to you for a second to kind of, again, talk about that a little bit, because I know recently you were involved in a great big hackathon event, and I love those too, as again, a way to bring people together, look at a challenging subject, get different voices around it, create something new together. I'd love to share a little bit more, just kind of focus on that area a bit, because we have big, supply talent gaps, and sometimes we have issues in attracting people in. And I speak to a lot of people, and sometimes it's kind of like, well, I haven't had this background, or I haven't worked in coding, or does it matter I've not done X and Y? And I try and tip that around to say, actually, you've got all those different experiences. It's so holistic. You can bring those to the fore. It's exactly what we need. All these different skills together make such a difference. So I'd love to hear that from your perspective below, and particularly like the event you did recently too. It just sounded amazing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You're 100% correct in that it's so important to have a diverse voice in the room when talking through these issues. And being able to connect the dots between multiple organizations, multiple type of institutions, and just having a good diverse voice in the room makes a direct impact in the solutions that are being put forward. And yeah, I mean, incredible hackathon that I was part of just a few weeks ago. Concluded the evaluation of some of the submissions on a global perspective, and you had teams from universities coming out of Europe. You had teams in North America. All of these diverse teams and voices that have different backgrounds. Some on the data science side, some more on the regulatory side. But you have all of these voices in the room who are putting forward solutions towards common challenges as well. And I think that it's a no-brainer that having a diverse voice in the room is going to get you the best result. And that is absolutely true. And it's one thing that we at Microsoft encourage in all aspects of not just this industry, but all aspects in terms of how we do business on a day-to-day as well. Connecting the dots between multiple organizations, between multiple institutions, ensuring that you have folks not just from the technology side, but bringing folks in from a regulatory perspective, from a finance perspective, from a supply chain perspective. All of these teams are critical in better understanding and assessing the challenges that we're dealing with, and then of course ultimately putting forward the most optimal solution. And I got to tell you, when you have a diverse team and when you have all of the stakeholders included in that process early on, it becomes a lot easier to sell that solution, and it becomes a lot easier to get buy-in from the stakeholders once you have something that's ready to solve a big hairy problem. Right, so you're doing due justice along the way by ensuring that you get all of the right folks in the room together. The output is far better, and then just being able to get buy-in from the industry is also a lot smoother that way as well.
Definitely. And I think with what you're doing with a support point of view as well, you're also bringing that forward with scalability and giving people that reach and partnership support as well that we talked about earlier. So all of those things together, everybody benefits, don't they? It really, truly is that way to go forward. I love that. Really brings it to the fore. And one thing I'd like to do, kind of as we get to near the end of a session like this as well, is kind of leave people with some kind of actionable takeaways. Because it can be quite difficult, can't it? With there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of challenges, and so how do you make small steps to make a difference quickly? What can you do that's kind of readily available? So, I wonder if we kind of bring things to a close by focusing on that a little bit. And one could be kind of a call to arms to get more people involved in the sector as well, kind of a top tip around that. But going back to energy more broadly, all the different areas we've talked about today, particularly the role of technology within this as well. What would your key reflections be to share with the audience to think about and maybe take on board with their organisation right now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing that I tell my children at times as well. It's the next time you flick on a light switch, or the next time you charge your phone, or even if you're driving an electric vehicle. I mean, there's a whole world of technology and innovation behind just that simple action. And we talked about a lot of those things today. The shift towards decentralized generation, rise of electric vehicles, smart grids, microgrids, all of this that's transforming this entire industry. But it's a lot to take in. But it really boils down to this. I mean, we're standing in front of on the cusp of a new era in the power utility sector. It's an era where technology and innovation is really going to drive towards a future that is more efficient, more reliable, and of course more sustainable. And this opens up a ton of opportunity for folks interested to get into this industry. You don't necessarily need to be an electrical engineer to be passionate about the energy transition and to be part of the energy transition. There's so many opportunities to be part of this fundamental shift that's happening. And, we talked about supply chain, regulatory, finance. I would encourage anyone that has an interest in this to look to how can you get part of it. And then there are simple things that everyone can do to kind of help the shift as well. Energy efficiency, which we didn't get a chance to really dive into deeply today, but energy efficiency at its core is managing how you consume your own power on a day-to-day. Become more efficient with your consumption at home. Reduce your consumption during peak hours. After work and on weekends, for example. So there's simple things that everyone can do. I encourage all of your listeners to. And if you're an expert in finance, you're an expert in supply chain, you're an expert in regulatory or policy, there's an opportunity to be part of this industry. It's not just geared towards your traditional engineering roles. It's open for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. And I think there's probably never been a better time to get involved as well, because there's never been more of a recognition about all those different skills that make a difference. People are really starting to see that. And also the fact, I think, that energy and utilities is the hub of the wheel of innovation and impact in so many others. It's right there, so that contagion effect of change, doing this well, it benefits so many. So yeah, being part of that and every role having that agency to contribute, it's not just even technical data facing roles, it's all those other different ones, really makes a difference. We need all those voices, all those experiences. We need neurodiverse talent, everything coming together, everything benefits. Going back to AI that we were talking about earlier, when you have that diversity there, the risks of things like, implicit bias, for example, that people can
Yeah.
be really unaware of, gets reduced too. There's 180 odd, human versions of bias too. So it's not just about the technology. So I love that. And it's holistic, isn't it, Bilal, at the end of the day, bringing all these different considerations together, from tech integration, from trusted partnership and ecosystem, to the right process, the right change management approach, and the right skilling and upskilling opportunities, and plus supporting people with skills confidence as well. I always mention that because I think sometimes that gets left behind as well. So I love the fact, just thinking about all the things we've talked about, I think in many cases we've helped make some of the invisible a bit more visible, and I love that, because there's certain things you shouldn't want to see. It should be friction free, and people don't need to see what's under it. But actually, unpacking, particularly the technology behind it's really important to help people understand that and get more confident in what tech can do and how it can help us all.
Absolutely. I mean, we take it for granted, some of the simple
Yep.
things, right? We take it for granted that the buildings that we work in, the houses that we live in, we expect when we flip on a switch that the power is going to be there, and we don't think
Yep.
about all of the technology that goes in behind it.
Exactly.
There's so much intelligence, so much innovation, so much development that goes in behind that simple task. It's definitely something that I don't take for granted, and I hope today's discussion kind of changes the perception for some of those folks who maybe aren't thinking about that on a day to day. But I would ask that your listeners take a pause and think about that, and all the complexity that goes in behind it.
Totally agree with that. And also the fact that no matter how complicated a lot of these issues theme are, in fact, there's always a way, there's always a role, there's always steps you can take, and all these little steps make a difference. There's always ways to have agency to make a change, whether you're deeply involved in this sector or consumer of it, so to speak. So from every kind of role, from every perspective, these small changes make a difference, and they build up, over time. You can get this contagion effect of really positive change. I know we have to leave it there. We ought to come back for a part two. There's so much we could discuss here, Bilal. There really is. But thank you so much for spending time with us today. It's been a fascinating conversation, and also a really meaningful one, I feel, as well. So thank you, Bilal. Thank you for joining us here on Tomorrow's Tech today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Sally.
My pleasure. Thank you. And thank you all for watching and listening too. We'll be back with another episode very soon. And meanwhile, we'll be sharing more assets around what a meaningful conversation today, and also sharing some ways that you can get involved in the energy sector specifically. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks for listening to this episode of Tomorrow's Tech Today. If you enjoy what we're doing, please subscribe to us and leave a review. It really means a lot. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and see more behind the scenes video footage on YouTube. Thanks for listening.